God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. I've got another grab bag of news items for you on this Monday. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy this video. So, first of all, in a callback to the mainstream media praising the North Korean regime's outreach efforts at the Winter Olympics, I just thought that this piece from The Sun is a good reminder of the kind of regime that the mainstream media was supporting with their praise. North Korean athletes at Winter Olympics desperate to avoid Gulag fate of 1966 World Cup squad. And this piece goes on to describe several of the North Koreans' athletic teams that have been subjected to Gulag treatment. So the entire 1966 North Korean soccer team were apparently arrested and thrown into a concentration camp for failing to bring about national glory. They apparently made it to the second round of the 1966 World Cup. Another group of North Korean athletes whom were probably punished was the 2010 North Korean World Cup team. I think it even goes on to, it goes on there to describe with images some of the torments that team was put through. Apparently similar treatment awaited Olympic team members who traveled to Rio in 2016 and came back with just 2 gold medals. Those, according to North Korean expert Toshimitsu Shigemura, those who won medals will be rewarded with better housing allocations, better rations, and maybe other gifts from the regime. Athletes who disappointed the leader would likely be punished with a downgrade in housing, reduced rations, and even being sent to the coal mines. And I think this is just a fitting reminder what kind of regime the media will fall over themselves to support in place of having to say anything nice about the Trump administration. The next piece I have here for you is related to the Florida school shooting. I wish I could get rid of that banner there at the bottom. Columbine survivor introduces bill to expand concealed carry in schools. Apparently, a survivor of the 1999 Columbine massacre has been in the Colorado House of Representatives and has been introducing this law annually ever since he was elected in 2014. Under state law, concealed carry permit holders may bring firearms onto school property, but must keep them locked inside their vehicles. The bill introduced by Patrick Neville would remove such limitations. Neville, like I said, has been introducing this bill since 2014, said that the current law creates the so-called gun-free zone in every K-12 public school, which is what I've been pointing out every time we have a school shooting in a gun-free zone, is the fact that it's a gun-free zone except for the bad guy that brings a gun onto the property. This act would allow every law-abiding citizen who holds a concealed carry permit issued from their chief law enforcement officer the right to carry concealed in order to defend themselves and, most importantly, our children from the worst-case scenarios. The Republican lawmaker has argued that more of his classmates in the 1999 massacre would have survived the Columbine attack, if some faculty had been armed. 12 students and 1 teacher were killed by 2 gunmen at the high school in Littleton, Colorado. Now, in a slightly different way, I've been talking about the gun debate since the Florida shooting, and one thing that I realized was that the left will never accept arming people at school against shooters because it's an admission that we can't get rid of the danger. It's an admission that we must accept the danger. And I would just like to point out that it seems to only be school shootings where the Democrats and the left will allow people to long for the days of the immediate post-World War II era, a simpler time where people were arguably people were better behaved, where people had more respect for their fellow man, where people were less likely to pick up a firearm, go into a school, and kill a dozen people with the culture, with sexuality, with the quote-unquote sexual liberation, with the relation, the accords between the genders, those kinds of things. The left says you must accept that this is the way that the culture is. We can't go back. There is no going back to the 50s. And they accuse the right and Republicans of longing for those quote-unquote good old days. And you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to long for the simpler days when people didn't have time to think about their sexual orientation, or people didn't have time to pretend that they were pansexual, two-spirited, other planar beings. People didn't have time to be as sexually promiscuous as they are today. It's backwards and old hat. You're not allowed to think that way. You're only allowed to think that way if you're talking about school shootings. You're allowed to long for the days when people didn't walk onto campus with an AR-15 and shoot up 50 billion people in 2 seconds, because we have to get rid of those guns. That is the agenda. Never forget, whenever these debates come up, the agenda is to get rid of guns, because there are ways to protect our children in the schools, and they're not going to accept them. The other thing that I wanted to do with this video is to point out that the left, while they think they have a monopoly over children, the children who survive these kinds of shootings' opinions, they in fact do not. And the right has some of these individuals on our side of the aisle as well. So your point that the children, won't someone think of the children are calling for gun control, your point is null and void, because we have children that are calling for less gun control. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, I didn't talk about it a lot last week. I wasn't that interested in it. I uploaded a short video where I kind of poked fun at the publication of this information. But the Mueller investigation has resulted in a little over a dozen Russians being indicted for efforts to interfere in the election. But the indictment doesn't indict the Russians for colluding with American entities, any American entities. It doesn't indict any American entities in knowingly cooperating with these Russian efforts. In fact, it appears that the efforts that were undertaken by the Russians in the campaign season of 2016 were done solely for the reason of bringing as much chaos into the American electoral system as possible. The Patriot Post has this opinion piece where they point some of these things out, and there was a line in here that I wanted to bring to the forefront. It's this last paragraph. It's interesting to note the immense weight Democrats and the left media are willing to attribute to 13 Russians in their ability to influence the outcome of an election, while at the same time downplaying as completely inconsequential the impact that millions of illegal aliens living in the United States have on our elections. Which party is it that time and again rejects common sense election fraud protections such as voter identification? I mean, think about it. While the efforts of these Russian individuals were not in the voting, involved directly in the voting booths per se, if their identities had been confirmed, perhaps people would have taken notice and not put as much weight behind the things that they were saying. Perhaps fewer people could have been misdirected. The other thing is I think that the writer of this column is exactly right. It's incredible to me that 13 people turned our democracy upside down, if you listen to the Democrats. 13 people did something that apparently millions and millions of illegal immigrants are incapable of doing. And that is totally flipping the expectations of an election on its head. Remember, in the world of the Democrats, the election was botched. Something went terribly, terribly wrong. Hillary Clinton was supposed to win. There was supposed to be no way for Trump to win. You had people on election night tweeting about how, or putting out messages about how Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance of winning the election. It was actually impossible for Trump to win until the moment that he won. So the election was stolen, and they had to find a way to make the election stolen, and this is their attempt. What they may not realize, or what may never manifest itself, just by virtue of the way that information is consumed by the population. I don't mean that in a disparaging way or in a glorifying way. I just mean that as that's the reality of information consumption in this country. The media and the Democrats and the left are setting themselves up to be the strongest voice, the greatest justification for their dreaded voter identification laws. Just think about it. If we were able to identify these 13 Russians, then the election being turned on its head could have been stopped. And so we might come to a place where we demand that people that are going to act in a political fashion must have their identities be tied to whatever they're using to influence an election. So you might have a lot of illegal immigrants outed. You might have a lot of illegal voting outed, and that would be something terrible for the Democrat Party, just based on the way that they talk about voter identification. That's all that I have to talk about at this time. It seems like, let me know what you think about this. It seems to me like the news has been bogged down as of late. Maybe I'm just so used to the rapid pace of 2017 that I'm having a little bit of trouble adjusting to how it seems to me like we've slowed down in 2018. Let me know if you feel the same way. Let me know what you think about the topics that we covered in this video. I'd love to hear your feedback, positive, negative, or otherwise. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, hit subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. You won't want to miss a single video in the future. I hope that you'll come back and join me. Until next time, good night, and God bless.